Okay, welcome to Free Together, Free Apart, Family Success During Quarantine, the holiday show. So, yeah, multi-generational family Zoom calls. We're all doing them, or maybe most of us are. Lots of different varieties of that. What a great idea to have a show on this. John Cammack, welcome. John, was this your idea or my idea?
If I say it's our idea, then there's too much togetherness.
Togetherness. It was
I think
my
it was
idea. I have no idea whose idea it was.
But
John,
we discovered that we were both doing this, and that's what led to the discussion today.
Yeah, because actually the real story is that I don't think I would have been doing the one I'm doing if it wasn't for John Cammack. So let me introduce John Cammack. Most of you know me. I'm Erik Thompson. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Center for Family Studies, which is bringing you this show along with our awesome producer, Roz Saunders, who does all this stuff for us. John Cammack is a retired senior executive from the financial services company T. Rowe Price in Baltimore. He is a resident of Baltimore, Maryland, and recently a resident of Vermont. And John and I met in the 2000s in the postgraduate program of the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family in Washington, D.C. Shout out to the Bowen Center and shout out to their program, their postgraduate training program, which is exceptional. John and I were in there together, and I was looking over my show. Who's this executive guy? What does he think he's doing in here? This is a place for counselors. Well, I wasn't that harsh, but anyways, we just started talking and we became friends. And over the years, he's been an extremely important colleague and mentor to me. Welcome, John Cammack.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, etc. So Cammack, as I call him, the great Cammack on occasion, was talking to me about this family Zoom call that he was doing. And it was like, wow, that is such a great idea. It was sometime this summer, I think. John, do you want to say a little bit about your family Zoom call journey, just to kind of tee it up?
Sure. Well, first, I have a history of when I did the Bowen postdoc work, I was in a distance or cutoff position with a good part of my extended family and one sibling. So I had to kind of work my way back in. And that's a whole other discussion. But by the time the pandemic hit, I was probably more in a position where I had more freedom to move around. It took a lot to get me to react, or more than it did in the past when all the mischief in my family takes place. So it occurred to me in early March that a convening of the family using Zoom in the early days of the pandemic, and if you think back to what it was like then, we were in this period of kind of shock. It's like, this thing is coming. We don't know if it's going to get us. How much are we at risk? There was just a lot of unknowns. And then in March, we had the market collapsing too. So I just thought, getting my extended family and multi-generations together on a Zoom call to talk about how we're experiencing the situation without trying to fix problems for one another, but to just be as fact-based as we could. In the early part of the Zoom calls, and we're now up to, I'm scheduling call 12 for the extended family, but the first one was, the more fact-based we can be, and the more we can be in relationship. And I was very happy to let the togetherness function in that call because we needed it, if you think about the acute anxiety. So I was okay with that. And let's challenge one another to be as fact-based about what we know and don't know, and what we as a family will want to learn to get through this as a community. And that was how it started, Erik. It then began to evolve, and we had 12 people on the first call, youngest being 21, oldest 94. And we agreed to meet every 2 weeks. So the first 3 were all pandemic related. What are the facts? It was a little bit on the market. Do you capitulate to the stock market or do you hang in there? And it was all, let's try to tap down emotions and think together as a family. Right? I did the best I could, but other people presented their information or perspective, but it was all, I think, just trying to get people grounded so we weren't living with reactivity. It then began to
Grounded in facts and objectivity. So were you structuring the process via which facts were presented in some way? Were you inviting presenters? I know you were presenting some yourself.
Well, I had access to some good sources of information, like decks from Goldman Sachs or, kind of American Enterprise or Brookings, because I have relationships there that other members of the family may not have been able to access. So I presented my stuff in advance, and then other family members would present their information, and then the calls were to discuss and distill down to what it meant for how we would function that day going forward with what we knew about the pandemic and the risks. And so a lot of it, I think for all of us in the first month or two, was separating signal from noise so you could make good informed decisions of how to manage your risks. So we just did it as a larger family unit. And in time that phased out, and then it began to shift to people were socially isolated, and we began to volunteer to present something on the aspect of one's life that they cared about or was part of who they were that they wanted to share with the family.
So now we're about to hear this chapter 2, but I want a couple points from chapter 1 I want to highlight.
Yeah.
One is that I think you were an early adopter. I think that you made predictions about what might happen with the market based on your connections and the intelligence that you're connected into, which turned out to be pretty accurate. And also that you're highlighting that family Zoom leadership doesn't start with the first call. It starts way before the first call. And that it took a lot of work on your part to start thinking like a family leader, moving across emotional distance, making broader connections. Murray Bowen had this wonderful little idea that if you could have a person-to-person relationship with every person in your multi-generational family who's living, it would do more to reduce your anxiety than anything else. I'm not sure if he was right about that, but it was an amazing idea. And person-to-person means, to me, my quick and dirty on person-to-person is, I know what you think, and you know what I think. Simple. So I hear you did a lot of work that led up to this call being even possible. Now you're in the second phase. Tell us a little about that.
Well, let me do the first phase since you brought this up. Before I extended the invitation to the family, I called each family member and said, I've been thinking of doing this. What's your take on it? So I just didn't send an email. I did one-on-one, and I didn't say, I'm inviting you to an event. I said, I am thinking of doing this. What are the pros and cons of it? And okay.
Okay, that's beautiful. So I'm gonna hit that as one of my bullets that I'm joining you with, is the art of inviting and the art of not making it obligatory. There's lots of different kinds of families, but I think in many families and some of the family Zoom meetings I'm a part of, the dynamic of the obligatory danger is raises up, it goes up and comes down, rose up and comes down. And I see it stimulating distance in some people at times. So this is a very interesting detail about how you launched it.
Yeah, and people came and other people didn't. And people are still coming, and one part of the family does not attend. So my observations of cutoff, independent of Zoom family leadership, I can see consistently kind of demonstrated in who shows up and who doesn't. So the cutoff, we finally brought 2 cousins in on the last call, some who hadn't talked to the family for 20 years because they heard something fun was going on. And I had to set that up where with my last name, Camach, the strategy wasn't to have a Camach invite other Camachs to come into the call, but I had to get another side of the family to do the invitation. And they were happy to come for an obel, but they probably wouldn't come for a Camach. So it was figuring out how to use triangles to get people to feel free.
So there's the positive use of triangles and understanding how triangles are such a fundamental part of a relationship system, all on with this larger vision of broadening the level of connectivity between the people on this family call. So an interesting success, first time in 20 years, and using the power of attraction.
Yeah.
I want to go back, John, and I just want to go back for a sec to this point. Probably one of the most important ones for me is this point about obligation I was mentioning earlier. So there's a tremendous power in the pursuit distance anxiety. When anxious pursuit is occurring, people usually triple the amount of distance they're even aware that they're stimulating in another person. So, there's such a thing as a non-anxious pursuit that just works. That's not a problem. But anxious pursuit is one of the great risks for people in their families because it gives them exactly what they don't want. Can you just share anything you've seen regarding this phenomenon of anxious pursuit on the multi-generational family Zoom call? You seeing any of that? And how do you manage it?
I think you just stay neutral.
You don't tell people to stop doing it?
As a leader, it's not to get an outcome, it's to create a place of convening where people can choose to come. But once they're there, it's like, how do you create a functional environment where people can thrive as a family leader? And it is to give them the freedom to engage with others, to observe family process, and to not feel obligated, but to electively be able to engage, and to become more involved through being inspired or feeling a sense of engagement rather than a sense of coercion.
I think it's an interesting question. Do you stop someone else is doing it? If somebody says, well, where's Paula, or, they said to the mother, hey, couldn't you, and there's a little bit of a pressured feeling. How do you respond to that moment? And you just said something interesting that you might not even have to respond.
You can be silent, or you can model. I've thought about this. I'm always observing who can speak in I statements. And of course, if you're doing, the family had the capacity to, once COVID settled down, well, what was left? Just light issues, non-emotional issues like social justice and a presidential election. So it's like we had a lot of content to work with, and sometimes we would avoid it. Politics was hard. Social justice and issues around race in America were a little easier for us. So I looked for people who could make I statements, and I did the best I could, which, as you know, on these issues is not easy. And I think it's where somebody gets a chance to work on themselves. So I view, every time I did this, I was in giving myself the gift of a extended multi-generational family system to be more of a self in, So it's like going and doing your weekly workout on these calls. And I think for me, it's been a gift that I've gotten so much out of this. And the power of Zoom is you can convene a family system through a few clicks.
Yes, instead of buying a plane ticket. Murray Bowen wrote a very, very powerful paper called the Anonymous Paper, It's known as the Anonymous Paper. That's not its published name, but it's in his book. It's an amazing story there about his journey with his family and working on himself and his family. And in it, he recommends that you drive down there once every 6 weeks or something, and you stay in a hotel that's about 10, 15 miles away. So you can sort of maintain your sort of freedom from the emotional system and then go in for visits. But as you said, technology may be helping us out here. Now, John, I want to get into something. So this thing you were just talking about regarding social justice or politics. So one of the things that's been very interesting to me is to hear your thinking about civil discourse on these calls and how you have managed yourself in that area. So, this is another possible thing that people can face is some conflict or tension starts rising up, subjects that are difficult for people to talk about, side taking. And just before I give you a chance to tell us what you've learned about that, I want to just say that we use the term, I'm using the term here, multi-generational family Zoom leadership. I don't view leadership as a position within a hierarchy. The way I think about leadership is behavior by any member of the group that contributes to the health of the unit.
Yep.
And so it's not the family Zoom leadership doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the conductor sitting up at the top of the stage controlling everything. Although I will say that on some of the ones that I'm involved with, I think a person who's thinking like a conductor is valuable. So what have you got to say about these things I'm talking about, John?
Well, my framework was that when we get into these political issues, I was less oriented around having my position heard, and as the leader or host, it was, I'm looking for too much togetherness or too much individuality. And
Wow.
my role is to facilitate the capacity of the group to think. And I'm not looking for a winner. I was looking for a process where there'd be more emotional maturity in the system at the end of the discussion rather than a winner of the debate.
Camach, you're schooling me right now. So tell me how you did that. It's very interesting to think of this, not looking for a winner or a loser, watching. You said you might watch for too much togetherness.
So if everybody in the family took a position to be Trump haters,
okay,
which in my family would be a default emotional position.
Yeah.
Right.
So people could be joining and piling and
so I might
maybe not even aware that one person in the room.
Erik Thompson would like, well, does anybody like something about Trump?
You would ask that question.
Well, it'd be,
you might.
Or I would make it a nice thing. I say, well, on criminal justice reform, he did some good work. Okay. So what I would do is try to break the emotional process, which had so much togetherness in it that I felt it was constraining people, or it was an anxious position to just try to free up the thinking a little bit.
So
I wouldn't say, Erik, what do you think? Because it would be more, I would make a statement that would free the thinking, or if somebody went too far away from the group, I would try to ask a question that would bring that person and somebody else back into maybe closer proximity around an issue. So I viewed I was a curator of the capacity of, in this case, my extended family to be in one another's presence, but to stay connected while they became more of a individualized in their thinking around an issue that people had a real skin in the game on.
John, I could see that we are going to need to do at least 3 of these shows. Right now, I'm going to do a quick poll. Let's find out what people are coming to this meeting with. It might warm up some audience interaction here. There's no way we're going to cover all the topics. We actually have a whole bunch of slides that we haven't even started. I don't think we're going to even get to them. But if you could just take us into your experience here for a little bit using this poll. And you have to scroll down as you answer the third one. If you keep scrolling down, there's 4 questions there. And then at the end, you can submit when you scroll down to the bottom. Then I'll share the results with everybody. John, I want to after the poll, just to tee you up, I want to hear more about this curator role. You addressed the issue of fostering capacity of people to differ. That's interesting. I just want to hear more about that. More about that general topic of this curator role, and you said you take some positions. That's another interesting area. So we've got almost everyone in. Here's a few more coming in. I'm going to share the poll results now so we can all see. So 90% participating in them. A real mix in terms of many people are a participant in one that others invite someone onto. I'm gathering. It's kind of interesting how you manage that seat too, I think.
Excuse me, Eric, can you share the poll results? We can't see them.
Sorry. Thank you.
There we go. Wow.
So like I said, a real mix on whether people on the call are the organizers or not. Pretty satisfying. And in a moment, we're going to invite people to talk about some of the learnings they've made, particularly maybe that are informed by Bowen theory. And then we'll have a breakout option for you all to just integrate some of the discussion today and the thinking that is represented here. Just looking at the topics of interest, I see managing political COVID or differences as the highest, how to manage emotional process, what to avoid as the highest. What to avoid? I said one thing, avoid chasing. Power of attraction. Anything else on what to avoid, Camach?
Well, we lost 2 people last summer in the family, 2 elders, and not directly tied to COVID, but they were both in retirement homes. I do think the social isolation affected their vulnerabilities, and they just failed. But because of COVID, the way we as a family generally celebrate the passing of a death, it was different this time. So I think I made a mistake, and I was too involved in building a memorial service into one of our family sessions rather than giving that choice to the widow and the children. I told them that because another family member wanted to do this, and they were say, well, if Bruce wants to do it, we're fine. But I don't think I clearly understood the emotional process, and it ended up being more obligatory than a collective celebration. So that was a miss on my part.
Another one in, which is in one of the meetings I'm involved with, I play the role of the person who starts and ends the meeting, and I never go over.
Yep.
If it's going good or bad, doesn't matter. I like the leave them wanting more, so that people can feel very confident when they join the call of the amount of investment they're being asked to make or not.
I'm now looking for emerging leaders who would take on organizing or running future calls. And I'm very passionate about seeing if the younger generation will do it.
Do you have children and grandchildren on your call?
We do. Well, we're late bloomers to having grandchildren. We've had them. Getting sons is a big victory because mine are both in their mid to late 20s. And we have, so I think a lot of connecting the generations is very important to me. So how do I have them curious about their elders? And I'm always looking for leaders because you want to kind of get out of the way at some point, even in this structure. So, so one thing I try to do is not be too central here as much next year, because I think if I stay in the role I'm in, then I'm beginning to overfunction in this role. So it's how to create a shared sense of responsibility for this. And if it doesn't get picked up, is that okay? If this thing stops for a while, I've been thinking about probably it would be, rather than me being the one who is always taking the initiative. So, because then if I'm not in it, it's picked up by other people, it's more, there's some sense of the functioning shifted to other people for something. And then I just keep my eye on the maturity of the process, but that's something, Erik, I'm thinking about.
John, you remind me of the birth story of the Vermont Center for Family Studies, which is that Ann Bunting had been organizing meetings and programs for, I think, about 5 years. And she called a meeting together of the people who were most interested and most invested in studying Bowen theory. And her announcement at the meeting was that she was going to stop organizing meetings. She kind of dropped the mic.
Yeah. I'm going to say one other thing.
That's how the Vermont
I
Center.
want to turn this over to the group, but I have one other thing to say. I think that it'd be useful. Certain relationships that were distant have become more regular out of this, and it is the listening of who is engaged for what on these calls that leads to the ability to have a one-on-one relationship independently of the Zoom call. Those are beautiful experiences for me. And there's a young great nephew who took an interest in investing, and we now talk every week. And there's a distant cousin where we didn't feel we had a lot in common. We now realize there is more in common. We're curious about one another, about who we are. I think this is a way, like the big scrum of 12, 14, 15 people on these calls lets you observe where there might be a bridge to build a one-on-one relationship where you and another are interested in knowing what you're really made out of. And I view these Zoom calls as been an opportunity for not only me, but other members of the family to find who they want to discover to be, who they're interested in building a more solid relationship with.
Anything more on the managing of differences? So that was something people were very interested in the poll.
Oh man, I mean,
It's probably a lot
I've observed people select out when we did the political talks. Some people just couldn't hang in there, and they haven't been back for a while. So again, the capacity to deal with anxiety around some of these issues, I realized as a family that, it's like what happens at Thanksgiving dinner. You have to be thoughtful about what comes up. Well, it's true in a Zoom call. And there's politeness, and you can see the force of togetherness kind of kill the capacity of people to want to take a position. So again, these Zoom calls for me, I always take a few notes afterwards of what I observed about self and family. And it's like getting a PhD when you can be with 12 to 14 people that otherwise it'd be almost impossible to assemble physically. So I view this as a lifetime opportunity for me. And I've thought about maybe some of those conversations should not be as group-based, but more one-on-one, where I take the initiative to say, I really want to know what you're thinking because I didn't hear it on the call. And let me start with what I think my position is, but also what I'm unsure of with my position, because I don't want to represent to any of you. I'm a fully developed self on issues regarding race in this country or equity. I am a work in progress. And ideally, I would like to think our family can develop more self through conversations that at times can be incomplete or end with different viewpoints. And to me, the best I can do is model that I can be as inconsistent, ambiguous, flawed in my logic as any other human being. And I will accept that in other members of my family as long as we show mutual respect and love and do not enter a cutoff position or distance. And I think that's almost like another type of emotional exercise if you can get through those situations. So I don't want to portray all the calls are like that. We've had a couple. A lot of them are, I mean, the other thing I would say in a family call, if you want to build a desire for people to come back, make sure you are the butt of a lot of humor. and you have a lot of laughs as a family. And because I think that's the healing. And if you're laughing, I think the more you're laughing, the harder it is to be anxious. A certain type of laughter. There's an anxious laugh too, but
I'm glad you
most of us can hear the difference between the two.
Well, a couple things. One, I do better when I'm dealing with people I differ with, if I'm asking questions, trying to understand their perspective rather than making sure that they understand mine, as ill-formed as it is. And on the humor thing here, I'm just going to click through these. Here's something we did. We did Family Jeopardy to Zoom, Family Zoom Jeopardy, the uber serious version. This was a title slide that we used. And my co-host was my niece, Maisie, who played the role of Alex Trebek Jr., the pretend son of Alex Trebek. And we put up some how it works for them. And then we had these categories: ancient grandpa history, modern grandpa history, ancient family history, so forth, epic in-laws. And people could choose, and actually people came up with questions. So that was kind of fun. So let's do some breakout and let people integrate some of the wisdom that we've been listening to from John Cammack here. And so I would just tee you up with these very simple questions. I'll let you look at them for a second. And we've been sharing these suggestions for people who are going to get into these breakout rooms of 3, which I will use the Zoom app to create in a moment. Suggest you skip the introductions and just somebody start right off saying, okay, well, here's what I'm thinking about. And then someone else talks, and I will give you 10 minutes for this breakout. And also to note that the breakout function has worked well in one of the family meetings that I'm involved in. Sometimes we did one on Thanksgiving, and there was resistance to the idea of using the breakout tool in Zoom from a few people. Other people, notably the younger ones, were like, absolutely, please do that. And then we broke people out, and when everyone came back, almost everyone said that it was really good to do that. So I'm going to set this breakout room function up now, and then we'll have people come back and we'll have some interaction with John.
before we went out of the breakout room. I think it can be a successful gathering down to 2 people. Even if your invitation list is 20, you just have to be adapted.
Erik, if you're talking, your mic's not on.
I'm sorry. Here's what's coming up. I'm going to just take a few minutes to share that with you, and then we'll interact for the closing 10 minutes of the meeting. Next week, I'm really happy to have the privilege to be interviewing Dr. Dan Papero, faculty member of the Bowen Center. Very wise man, has done a lot of thinking about family, and many of you know Dan. It'll be great to have him here for that interview. And then a family business leader who's a very thoughtful person and has used Bowen theory a lot will be coming in early January. And then we just added this one. Actually, it's Wednesday. It says Thursday, but I think that one cannot be on Thursday. So it's Wednesday. Continuing to explore this relationship between inner silence and differentiation, and also to talk some more about this course that we're offering here, Moonlight Swim, which you can see more about on our website. And then we have these 2 3-hour conferences coming up, one in January on polarization leadership with a very distinguished professor from Middlebury College who has a lot to say about polarization, Matthew Dickinson, and Kim Ziegelman, who's got a great story about family leadership overcoming polarization. And then just to note, we've set the date for this March 5th, and we've got a title for our Walter Smith meeting, Going Beyond a Disease Model of Social Impact. So, John, how was your breakout?
There were 4 of us, and we shared experiences with our family using Zoom. Is happening. There was one part of the conversation, forget who asked the question, was it, I think Dave. It's like, is it just good to get people together? And kind of where we went was just having people interacting with each other where they're non-anxious selves is everybody wins, you know? And the content you put on top of it is secondary to giving people a environment where they can find their own way to function at a higher level, where you have the kind of the functional members of the group have their presence in the Zoom call, and that alone has a certain amount of Bowen magic to it.
Bowen magic, the idea of a non-anxious presence, and I think you've said a lot about that and what it would look like on these multi-generational family Zoom calls. One of the big takeaways I'm going away with is watching more and trying to control less.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's conflict, whether it's distance, whether it's even, you know, people kind of joining together too much and in a foment of agreement about something. Even if I know there's 2 people on the call or maybe are feeling alienated by that, I could just sort of watch it, see how they handle it. And that might represent a more non-anxious presence for me. So I'd love to hear some wisdom from other people on the call. If anybody wants to just unmute and share some of the best thoughts you heard in your small group or that you're having about the integration of Bowen theory and multi-generational family Zoom leadership, or ask John a question, go for it.
John, do you have a thought about the number of people? What's the largest number of people you had that was still manageable?
I had 17 and it wasn't manageable.
Okay.
I noticed there was a big drop off after the call and we had to kind of rebuild. Also, people in their late 80s and 90s, they told me they were a little overstimulated, or it was just hard for them to keep up with that much going on. And people cutting in and out. And some of them, if you think of the formatting, like I'm looking at all of you, but I realized two members of the family, the screen would go to whoever was talking. So there's some things to administratively, I've learned for older people, you have to make this really easy for them. And we always, it's really lovely on these calls. It's almost like a tradition that the two 90-year-olds never get there on time. And somebody has to reach out and help them get on. And it's like this act of generosity to have these younger people call in. So and then they're there, and then we all celebrate, and they're so happy that they figured out how to do a Zoom call, right? So I think the number of people may be tied to age, but I think if you want to have a conversation where you want everybody involved, I would cap it around 10 or 12 people.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I want to throw in about that is if one's goal is to increase the level of connectedness of a group, that's an interesting project. Simple thing like just having it be a steady time. I think my position for mine is I will start the meeting at the same time every week, once a week, half an hour, and I will end it at the same time every week. And the other one is, like you're saying, for the elders, is trying to find a partner who could be like a tech partner for them.
Yeah.
So anybody else, what else are you thinking about? Questions or observations about this interesting topic?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I wonder how you manage.
And then Thomasina. Mm-hmm.
That's a good example. How do you manage interruption or the flow of the conversation or turn taking in the dialogue?
Well, you need a moderator. You really do. I mean, we have Native American traditions in our family, so we could have the kind of a symbolic talking stick. You pass the talking stick on to somebody else. We've learned to use the chat room where we know who wants to speak, and that helps. But then there are times where it's just a rabble-rousing, whoever has the loudest voice. But again, for the elderly, that's hard. So we've had to kind of create some protocols around it. So I don't really have an answer, Christine, other than it's still a work in progress, really.
I would say on my journey, it's been don't overmanage it, but use questions to guide the flow. Sometimes bringing in a person who hasn't been part of it is a way to gently interrupt something that's kind of taking up too much time, or but also to be remembering that folks are responsible for their own experience. Recently, someone told me about a Zoom call. This is somebody I was coaching, and they said the niece called and said, "That was the most boring meeting, Dad." And the dad says, "Well, how are you going to make it better?" So I don't want to hear the complaint. I thought that looked like leadership. So Thomasina, what are you thinking about?
I wanted to just share that I appreciated something John said about how he shares his opinion, that saying this is what I think, this is what I believe, and then also sharing what it is you're not sure about, John. And I think that's one of the challenges when it comes to this issue of polarization, that everybody appears to be so certain about what they think that they can't hear what other people think, nor does it occur to them that maybe my assumptions are not what I think they are. So I think that shows real leadership and invites other people to think about, yes, this is what I believe, but what is it that I'm not sure about? What do I need to learn more about or might be interested in exploring further? So I appreciated that. Thank you.
I'm just going to take another minute here to share a few more slides with you. Click through these tech tips. Someone asked if I could share maybe this one here, how the Family Zoom Jeopardy worked. I will do that. If you want that, let me know. And I just want to mention that These meetings are supported by generous donors like yourselves. Many people on this call have put a big smile on our face by donating and contributing. It's easy to do on our website. This is what your donation will do. Help train expert family therapists and advisors who don't make things worse and put people in a position to strengthen their own families. Once again, 3 meetings coming up all at the same time. The third one there is on a Wednesday rather than a Thursday. Let me know if you want to know more about that. And this is our current training program. We're going to be doing it again next year, something that is out there and available for you folks. So anybody else have I'd love to hear another comment or a question.
Offer a word of thanks. I really appreciate Erik and John, you all pulling this together. And we've been doing Zoom family gatherings, and a couple of my aunts are here from Texas. So we've been doing it since early April, and it's just helpful to get a little sort of breath of fresh air into what we're doing. So thanks for putting it into practice.
Thank
One
you.
thing that this has helped me think about is that on our family calls, I can lean into the group as a resource if I have questions about something. And I think that can help show my openness to hear other opinions, as well as learn about what other people think, as well as just good information. And so I'm going to be a little bit more thoughtful about that, about using my family as a resource. So
Thank you, Dave Galloway. Go Canada. Go Canada, go Texas.
Talking about Canada, here's an idea from Montreal. We use ours to talk about shows that are good to binge watch. Hey, what are you guys watching? Oh, I really like this, and making notes and doing that. So,
all right, we're at the end of our time. I see many friends' faces, and it's good to see you. And I hope to see you next week when I'm talking to Dr. Papro. John Cammack, thank you so much. Really primarily just for all the thinking and the work you've done over the years to integrate these ideas. It's such a precious body of knowledge, and you're a wonderful embodiment of it, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.